Greetings, my dark folk. I would like to talk about something that's going on in the community, the Goth community today. And I hope I don't have to make another one of these videos, but it's politics. That's right, politics. I'm going to put it like this. Prior to the mid-2000s, the Goth community was essentially apolitical. If you did have politics, you, as a member, generally kept it out of the community. Yes, there were bands that made societal statements about this, that, and the other. But here's the difference between making a societal statement in a song and being political. You make your societal statement in a song and you go about your business to the next, writing the next song or the next album. If you are political and it's not just a societal statement, you're out there advocating. Getting yourself known, advocating. A good case of that is the mainstream band U2. And yes, I say it like it's a dirty word because I don't like the band, never have. Anyway, now what's going on is you have baby bats who are born in the 90s, the 2000s, maybe the late 80s. When I say late 80s, I'm not 87, 80. 89, who are saying that Goth has always been political. Okay. I'll give you an online example of why Goth is not political. Yahoo chat rooms and Yahoo groups. When I went online, late 90s on Yahoo, I hit the graveyard, which was a chat room. There was three of them. Graveyard 1, Graveyard 2, Graveyard 3. Nobody was pushing politics. Nobody was saying vote for this person or don't vote for that person. If you vote for this person over here instead of person A, you're not Goth. They didn't tell you what you could wear, what businesses you could buy your clothes from, stuff like that. And if you didn't go with what they said, you wasn't Goth. There wasn't none of that bullshit going on. When I got into Goth in about 92, 93, there was none of that bullshit going on. Nobody was telling people, you can't vote for this person. You can't vote for that person. You have to be a leftist. You can't be conservative. You want to know why? Because the community was essentially apolitical. We didn't give a rat's ass about politics. We didn't bring it into community in real life offline or online. Now what you have when it comes to these old people that are in the Goth community today that might have been in it back then, that were politically minded but wouldn't say anything online or offline because they knew the community was not political, is people who are rewriting their own narrative to fit Baby Bat's narrative that Goth has always been political because it come from punk, so they can feel relevant, and at the same time help create a false narrative so that they can finally be political in the community. Then you have another set of old people that are in the Goth community. That is people who, when they were young, wouldn't get into the Goth community because it wasn't popular. They didn't want to be labeled a freak or anything like that. And now that it's really popular, and I mean, it did have a brief vogue with the mainstream in the 90s, thanks to The Crow and people that are Goth being drug onto talk shows. Huh? But it was never like it is now. It's never as popular as it is now. And they want to get into it, and they study everything they can find about it online. They watch documentaries and stuff like that online, that stuff, and they build up themselves a little persona about being this elder Goth. And unfortunately, you can't check Goth identity to find out if they've always been Goth or not. And then they give you this BS spiel about, oh yeah, the Goth has always been political, which helps further perpetrate a false narrative. So again, I'm going to put it like this. If Goth was political in the 70s, 80s, 90s, up to the 2000s, why when you went out to clubs, why wasn't people gabalacking about politics? When you hung out with your friends, that was also goth. Why wasn't they gabalacking about politics? Easy, it wasn't going on because the scene was not political. Why wasn't in that when Yahoo and AOL and all that had chat rooms and groups? Why wasn't people gabalacking about politics back then? Because the scene was not political. It was essentially apolitical. If you were a political person, we didn't, and it was part of the community, we didn't care. And you respected the fact it was apolitical and did not bring your politics into the scene. All that changed in mid-2000s when President Obama started running for office and showed people the internet could be political. Unfortunately, not only did he show the world that the internet could be political, but he radicalized the world into being political on every front, and it's got worse and worse and worse. Now we have these people who either had political leanings in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that out of respect for the community wouldn't say a thing, are now coming out and changing the narrative. We've got baby bats who weren't even around back then. If they were around back then, were too young for the mainstream society, let alone the goth community, to make an impact on, who are pushing a narrative that says goth has always been political. Then we have these old coots that have finally decided they want to go goth, and they're using it in the internet to create a persona of having always been goth, so they can push their political narrative. And that's why the community is so messed up. So I'm going to put it like this. The community was never political until the mid-2000s. That's when it went downhill. And this is the type of people I just love. And it is this right here. Those who want to invalidate people's personal experiences. Nothing I have said has invalidated anybody that was political back then's experiences if they were goth that was in the community. Why? Because I acknowledge the fact that they were goth, but they would keep their politics out of the scene when engaging in the scene. But this is the type of people I really love. My cats would love this that I have. Would love these type of people. These are the type of people who get online, and when a elder goth says the community wasn't political back then, it's not political, really political now, it's apolitical, you're dragging the mainstream, they go, well, it was always apolitical. If you didn't see this, it's because you didn't realize it and you really didn't understand the community. They won't take somebody who was around back then, who saw the scene as what it was, apolitical, and then they want to invalidate his experiences and basically claim he's not a real goth, he's a poser and all this stuff. Again, like I said, there were people in the goth community that was political back then, but they didn't drag it into the community. And now some of them, not all of them, but some of them are trying to rewrite their narrative to paint the scene back then as political. And these young bats who are coming up here saying, oh, if you don't get it, they just don't get it. It was political back then, blah, blah, blah. If you were born in the 90s, you wasn't around long enough in the 20th century to see the community the way it was. How can you tell? If you were born in 2000s, again, you've got no experience back with it before it was political. How can you tell what it was? When a bunch of people who are elder goth, whether they had political leanings or not back then, are telling you that the community itself was apolitical, and that people that had political views back then didn't drag it in the community, and were repeatedly telling you this, you need to shut up, sit down, and listen, because we know what we are talking about. You were speculating on the past based on the way the community has turned out now. And the community has turned out the way it is now because young bats, baby bats, are dragging the mainstream into the community, and they say, then justify it by saying, the community's always been goth. The community's always been political. No. You haven't disengaged yourself from the mainstream, so you're dragging it in. You're wanting to change the goth community and what it means to be goth into essentially a dark version of the mainstream. And personally, I don't want to go dark stream just because some baby bats want it that way. Some elder Goths who were political back then who decided now is the time to change the narrative and paint the community like it was always been political when they knew it was not always been political. They know it was apolitical and they was keeping their politics every time. Or they're old farts who have just recently got into the community and have done enough research that they can build up a persona pretending to be Goth way back then so they can push their politics. I don't want that. I don't want to be dark stream. I don't want to be a mainstreamer dressed Goth. And that's what a lot of these baby bats really are that are pushing the whole notion of Goth having always been political. They're mainstreamers in Goth clothing, and unfortunately, it's hard to sort them out. To be honest with you, as a person who likes the Goth community, been in it since the early 90s, realizes that it's apolitical, but people have always had their own political views, and they just chose not to bring it into the community, and that some people are apolitical, and here's something that really ticks me off. People saying, oh, if you're apolitical, that means you're taking a political stance. Let me tell you something about a Gen Xer. We don't have to do anything based on politics. We can just simply decide for ourselves not to be political without any reason other than the fact we don't like politics. You don't have to be political and make a political stance by being apolitical. You could be apolitical without the first political stance or the first political leaning. Being apolitical is not necessarily a political stance. And if you young bats don't like that, well, guess what? I don't care. You people are ruining the community. Between baby bats just wanting it to be political, you're ruining the community. Elder Goths who are now wanting to rewrite the narrative that it's always been political, guess what? You're ruining the community. And for you old farts that are finally dragging yourselves into the community and doing your research on the community, making this big persona so you can pretend to have been a Goth way back in the 70s or 80s or 90s, and you're bringing in your politics, you help them build this false narrative that Goth has always been political, you are ruining the community. I would propose that these people that want the Goth community to go from being apolitical to being political, step out of the Goth community, do their own thing, and call it a different name. But don't call it Goth because it's not. Because you have ruined the Goth community. That's why it's so divided. You have people arguing about whether it's political or not. And the problem is, everybody's saying it's political. You don't want to listen to a elder Goth that will say the community was not political back then. It's not political now. And that, yes, there was people that had political views back then, but they left their political views outside of the community. Oh, and this saying dressing alternative, dressing Goth is a political statement? Bullcrap. Dressing Goth is not a political statement. It is simply an expression of who you are. And in the day you start saying who you are has to be political, is the day you're lost in understanding what Goth is, and you've stepped your ass outside the Goth community. Because you're not identifying as a Goth, you're identifying as a political person, dressed Goth. And if you don't like that statement, too bad.